I think one of the other things to maybe call out, and I think you mentioned this before, you guys have recently announced partnerships with BitGo, Copper, and Hex Trust, really around allowing borrowing and lending activity to happen directly from the major custodians. Not sure if you want to highlight anything that's special about, those, that sort of set of partnerships, especially as it relates to, sort of this concept of, risk management and sort of, dealing with different counterparties.
I think having custodians is very helpful in a couple of respects. One is that when we're dealing with really large counterparties, if they're a better credit than us, they don't necessarily want to entrust their collateral with us all the time, or they might have compliance restrictions that prevent them from doing that. And so by us having the partnerships with Anchorage and BitGo and other custodians, we're able to remove that from the equation. So they can put the Bitcoin with Anchorage in a tri-party. The tri-party agreement just means that we can ask for the collateral if something goes wrong. If Maple happened to wind up shop tomorrow, the borrower doesn't have to trust us. They can just ask the custodian for their collateral back. So having those custodial relationships has opened up a wider set of borrowers and also made it possible for us to do business with larger borrowers who wouldn't, who don't use smart contract stuff like Aave and who wouldn't deal with smaller lenders. The other reason it's important is that these custodians also bring us business. Like a lot of them don't want to be in the lending business themselves, and they don't want to bring a potential borrower to us and then us say, okay, that's fine, we'll onboard you, but you have to take your Bitcoin out of custodian A and put it in custodian B because we like them better. So the fact that we've been onboarded with all of these custodians, we did a deal where we had over $100 million of ETH collateral, and we onboarded with a custodian who brought us that deal, and so they got to keep the business. We got a new relationship, and the borrower got to keep the custodian they really liked. So that was a win-win-win, and those are the relationships we try and build.
Awesome. And in the past year, you all have introduced Syrup Finance, and I think for the audience, maybe getting a little bit from you on sort of why you decided to launch it to complement Maple's existing business and sort of the thought process around it.
It was a very interesting time when we launched Syrup USDC last year. So the initial thinking was that we could see all this growth happening on the DeFi side for other protocols, whether it was Athena, Morpho, Pendle, and we were kind of missing out on that. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to have a distribution channel where we could do partnerships with these great teams, whether it's Spark, or Pendle, or Morpho, or Athena. We wanted to be part of those ecosystems and not to miss out. And we also wanted to have a vehicle where we could take in, let's say, retail customers or your DeFi whale customers who aren't really comfortable operating inside the US or dealing with US partners. And so prior to that, we had SPVs that were set up in Delaware, and they could only take in money from accredited investors. So what we did was we set up a Cayman BVI structure. And this allowed us to kind of work with more DeFi native firms and to do things like Morpho looping, the Pendle, PT-YT split, and allocations from Spark. So I think that ended up being a massive strategic win for us because like I mentioned earlier, Alex, we now have a channel where we can source capital from, DeFi, that is very flexible and very scalable, and that our competitors in the centralized or CeFi lending space don't actually have access to. So I think it's ultimately been a huge strength for us having that. But at the time, it was just to introduce a kind of DeFi distribution channel so that we could better compete with those other parties that I mentioned.
Got it. And then as part of that, there's obviously this Syrup token that was obviously, new relative to that. And maybe talk to the audience a bit about the benefits for token holders, are there interesting sort of incentives and so forth, and how that, adds value or impacts sort of the overall ecosystem around Syrup.
And sorry, I just add one more thing. So on Syrup USDC, it's also given us a channel to do partnerships with some of the exchanges now. So they all have their own earn programs or Web3 wallets. Now, users from OKX, from Binance, from Bybit or BitGet can all click through and deposit into Maple through Syrup USDC using those Web3 experiences. So the partnership, it's really been quite powerful in strengthening those partnerships for us. And then the other point around the token. So I think the token really brings it all together for us. So previously, until last week, we actually had this kind of point of confusion where we had the MPL token, which was the old governance token. And then we've had the Syrup token, which was the new governance token. And we had the two existing in parallel. Now that migration is finished and we just have the single Syrup token, which is the sole governance token of the entire protocol. What it does is it gives everybody long-term alignment in the success of the protocol. It allows people to stake. It gives a mechanism to return value through doing token buybacks. But it also allows everybody to participate in governance. Everyone who holds staked Syrup can go and vote on significant policy decisions and strategic direction for the protocol. But I think a very important point that is often missed in the DeFi space, we don't have a separate equity entity that raised capital into it and that has separate or sometimes conflicting interest versus the token holders. We only have the token. Everyone on the team has been incentivized with the token. And then the founders, Joe and I, we just have the tokens. We don't have separate equity in an entity that has raised from VCs and that is collecting the protocol revenue. So I think that unity of alignment, not having a separated cap structure, which you've seen play out kind of not so well in cases like Uniswap, where should Uni Labs be getting the revenue? Should the Uni token holders be getting the revenue? Here, it's just all Syrup token holders all the way down.
Very, very aligned and simple. So one of the things, Sid, that you've mentioned publicly is really an interest in expanding geographically. And the two regions that, I've at least seen in the public domain have been Asia and Latin America. So I'm curious, when you look at those two regions, what are the opportunities that you see and how are you sort of tailoring Maple's approach to access those opportunities regionally?
I'll talk about Asia first. So Asia's been historically been a very tough region or tough nut for us to crack. I think it's very relationship driven. It really does rely on having boots on the ground with local knowledge and local relationships and the ability to go and meet people in person. It's less of a do business over Zoom calls type culture and more of a do business, when you can shake the hand of the person in front of you and meet them in real life. Asia is even more strategically important for us now that we have the BTC Yield product. And in essence, that is partly an effort to reach and better penetrate that market. We know that BTC ownership is very heavily concentrated in the Asia Pacific region. And so now we have what we think is the best risk-adjusted yield on BTC in the market with our partnership with CoreDAO. And so we've actually just hired our first Asia BD person out of Hong Kong. And already in their first 2 weeks, they're meeting a lot of people and starting to establish those partnerships. So we are really making a concerted effort to do better and to increase our footprint in that region. LatAm also has very high BTC penetration. So I think the BTC Yield product should do well. But they also, unlike Asia, they actually have more problems with inflation. And so I think stablecoins also have a really wide penetration down there. So I think in that region, either of our USDC or BTC Yield products can find a receptive audience, but we're still in the process. We haven't really built out a BD team down there. So that's probably the next stage for us in terms of team expansion.
Got it. So maybe pivoting quickly to, talking a little bit about where there's application and where you see, sort of use cases for AI relative to what you've seen both at Maple and sort of beyond in DeFi. So obviously somebody that sort of worked at this intersection of TradFi and Web3, you're not, immune or sort of oblivious to sort of technology sort of clashing with sort of traditional, use cases and so forth.
Totally.
So, when you think about how you see AI affecting this space, Web3 and even specifically, DeFi, how do you see it today? How do you see it into the future?
I think today, the first use cases that we're seeing have been more on the trading front. Trading, meme coins, AI16Z. But I think how we're looking at it, we at Maple are trying to use it to kind of scale the operations of our business. So I'm trying to use it to make the guys on my team more productive, whether they are doing credit risk analysis or whether they're doing operations or sales. We're actually running a pilot at the moment where we're trying to do AI backtesting of collateral volatility to work out what should the settings have been on certain loans and whether we should accept or reject certain collateral types. Currently, this review process can take us 2 weeks, up to 2 weeks. And so if we can have AI do it much faster, it's going to be a huge time save for our team because it currently involves people from different functions at Maple. So it is very labor intensive. So I think the risk management in DeFi is going to be hugely powerful. And then I think where it goes eventually is you will have a lot of DeFi will actually just end up chat interfaces where you're having an AI agent kind of execute certain strategies for you, whether it's take out a loan from Maple if you're an institutional borrower, or maybe borrow somewhere else and deploy to one of Maple's yield strategies. So I think near term, it's been trading. What we're in the process of at the moment is seeing the application of AI for risk management. And then where it's going to go is it'll probably be a significant part of the user experience of DeFi.